Welcome to the deep dive for this week. Don't forget to visit the website at deepdiveau.net. Check out our socials and Patreon page at the Deep Dive AU. Subscribe via your favourite podcast app or like and subscribe at our YouTube page at the Deep Dive AU.
The Deep Dive podcast mugs are now available for purchase and are currently on sale. Just go to our merchandise page at deepdiveau.net to purchase one. Don't miss out on this opportunity to grab one for yourself or as a thoughtful gift for a fellow podcast enthusiast.
This is the Deep Dive Podcast. And here is your host, Michael Coles.
Melody Edwardson is a registered counsellor in private practice with over 30 years experience working in disability and mental health services. She specialises in working with women and non-binary people to find ways to release anxiety and stress so they can thrive regardless of what life throws at them. Melody has changed her life to accommodate herself since her late autism diagnosis and helps others do the same. One of the most practical and effective tools Melody uses in her life and in her practice is emotional freedom techniques, also known as EFT tapping. Melody Edwardson, welcome to the Deep Dive. So what is emotional freedom technique, EFT tapping, and how does it work?
So, emotional freedom technique, or EFT tapping, is a simple, highly effective energy psychology technique. It involves thinking about something stressful or upsetting while tapping on acupressure points on your own face and upper body, which sends calming signals to your brain. So, when we're calm, the thinking and feeling parts of our brain are working together, and we can think straight and make considered decisions using the thinking part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex. But when stressful or upsetting things happen, this activates part of our midbrain called the amygdala, the emotional part of our brain, and that's on the lookout for threats of all kinds, kind of like the smoke alarm in the kitchen. So when the amygdala is activated, it signals to us that there's danger. We need to be alert to do something about it to protect ourselves, so fight or flight. But if we get too many alarm messages, we can freak out and our body gets flooded with stress hormones like cortisol. And what that means is basically the prefrontal cortex is offline and not in charge anymore. We can't make good decisions because we're overwhelmed with our emotions. And there's one more part of the brain, which is the hippocampus, that works closely with the amygdala. And that's involved in storing and processing emotional memories. So the hippocampus tells the amygdala what memories need to activate a threat response and what don't. So when we're tapping, it sends a signal to the amygdala, there's no threat here, it's safe. This situation is safe. And when we tap, the hippocampus learns that that memory is no longer a threat and new neural pathways are made. So the memory's still there, it hasn't magically disappeared, but now it's encoded as neutral.
Okay, so what are the primary benefits of EFT tapping for mental and emotional health?
Mm-hmm. So the number one thing that people say to me after they do tapping is, I feel lighter. So the primary benefit of EFT tapping is being able to let go of emotional baggage that's weighing us down. So maybe there's something we've been carrying around for years, taking up headspace, something we ruminate over and over again, can't come up with any solution to because maybe there is no solution. So EFT frees up mental space for us to get on with our day, feeling more balanced and calm, and we have more energy freed up to use however we choose. So it basically allows us to live more in the present moment and get back into our comfort zone. And the best thing is it allows us to stop struggling, trying really hard to let go of things or beating ourselves up because we can't let go of things. But with EFT, there's just no effort required.
Okay, so what are the key tapping points used in EFT and why are they significant?
Mm-hmm. So there's 9 key tapping points in clinical EFT, and these are the points used in tapping research so that they know that each study is measuring the same type of thing. So there's also additional points that can be used, but the 9 points are on the side of the hand, in between the pinky finger and the wrist, in between the eyebrows, outside of the eyebrows, under the eye, under the nose, under the mouth on the chin, under the collarbone, under the arm where the bra sits, and on top of the head. So all of these points respond to meridians or correspond to meridians in acupuncture. So, for example, under the eye, that aligns with the stomach meridian. So in a predecessor to EFT, there were many protocols, some using single points or multiple points. But in 1995, the current formula was introduced. And so these 9 points form a simple sequence that are easy to remember and cover off on a whole heap of different things in the body. So that's just what was decided on.
Okay, so how does EFT tapping integrate with traditional psychological therapies?
Mm-hmm. So it integrates quite easily with other traditional talking therapies. So it's another tool in the toolbox for regulating emotions, energy, and mood. And in my experience, it enhances the effectiveness of the therapy because it's literally tapping into the feelings, not just the logical thinking part of the brain. And research comparing EFT to CBT found EFT got the same result for people experiencing anxiety, but in fewer sessions. So knowing that, it is something that I want to share. So in my counselling practice, I use EFT in a few different ways. So in session, if somebody's really upset to the point they're having trouble speaking, I can invite them to just pause and tap with me until the intensity of their emotion reduces. And during this time, we can tap on all the points or just apply gentle pressure to the points. And then I can just say reassuring things like from time to time, like take your time, all your feelings are valid, I'm here. And people say that tapping in that situation gives them something to do and they feel less uncomfortable being upset. And then once they've calmed down sufficiently, they can resume their story and a better place to decide what they want to happen next. Also, sometimes people might not be highly distressed, but they've just got a lot to say and they want to say it all in one go without any interruptions. So I just tap with them while they're talking and don't say anything till they're finished. And it's just another way of showing I'm giving them my full attention, I'm attuned to them. I also teach it to clients as a self-help strategy that they can easily learn and use outside of sessions anywhere, anytime when they're feeling activated or overwhelmed in the moment or after something stressful has happened in between sessions. And sometimes people say they like to tap with me in session but don't feel confident initially to do it at home by themselves. So I can make up a little video of a simple sequence so they can have it on their phone. And some people come to me specifically for EFT tapping, other people it's general counselling, and I introduce them to EFT as a tool. And there's been a couple of times where people have initially said, no, EFT is not for me, and I've said, that's fine. Then later they've told me they were at home and they're feeling really upset, nothing else was working, and they thought, what the heck, I'll give EFT a go. And lo and behold, it worked. And they're so surprised. The brilliant thing is you can be skeptical about EFT and it can still work. And we can even tap on, I'm not sure if EFT is going to work for me. We can do a tapping round on that.
What scientific evidence supports the effectiveness of EFT tapping?
So EFT has been researched in 125 clinical trials, and there have been 300 peer-reviewed journal articles, and results show that clinical EFT improves multiple physiological markers of health. So it can decrease cortisol by 73%, anxiety by 40%, decrease depression by 35%, increase happiness by 31%, and increase immune markers by 113%. Decrease blood pressure by 80%, pain by 57%, PTSD symptoms by 32%, and food cravings by 74%. So Dr. Peter Stapleton is one of the world's leading researchers studying EFT, and she's now based at Bond University on the Gold Coast here in Queensland, and previously she was at Griffith Uni. And she says that tapping is not a placebo or a distraction. You're actually changing your body's chemistry. And she also points out that any newish therapy, there's a gap between when it's researched and shows results and when it's accepted in the mainstream. And in 2019, the Australian Allied Health Awards gave Psychologist of the Year to Dr. Peter Stapleton for her research and work in EFT. So hopefully it won't be long until everybody knows about EFT. And for listeners interested in finding out more about the latest research, they can look up Dr. Stapleton's work, and I can give you a link for that in the show notes, Michael.
Okay, not a problem there. So how can EFT tapping help with managing anxiety and stress?
So EFT tapping dampens down your nervous system's activation. So it gets you out of fight or flight mode and restores the state of rest and digest so that you can be calm and connect to yourself and other people. And that's actually where we're supposed to be most of the time. Having our brains and bodies on high alert, responding to threats all the time is not actually a natural state for us to be in. But we do live in stress-saturated lives. So everyday stress, like none of your friends liking your social media post, or strangers on the internet making negative comments, or someone takes your car park at the shops, or your kids laugh at your haircut, or you get so many emails you don't know how to answer them. These aren't life or death situations. However, to your brain, they still set off your amygdala. It's like, beep, 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 do I need to do something about that? Beep, 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 do I need to do something about this? And so you don't get the chance to completely reset before the next alarm. And chronic stress and overwhelm can lead to burnout when we don't have the resources to manage the demands. So EFT is a resource that we can all use. And what I love about it is you can use it in the moment when the stress is happening. So, for example, you could squeeze tapping points on the sides of your fingers, under the table during a job interview or a stressful meeting or a doctor's appointment, or when you're on public transport, or maybe you walk into a room full of dirty clothes or a dishwasher that was supposed to be emptied. You don't even have to use words. You can just look at that thing and tap.
Is there a connection between EFT tapping and acupuncture or acupressure?
Yes. So the acupressure points are the same as the points used in the Chinese medicine for thousands of years. So in Chinese medicine, the meridian system, which lies in the body's connective tissue and moves energy through the body, is the mechanism of change activated by tapping. Some scientists doubted the validity of acupressure points as the meridian system of Chinese medicine lacked an anatomical basis verifiable by Western science. But more recently, modern science came up with different technologies to look inside the human body and discovered a new anatomical system called the primovascular system, and that corresponds closely to the Chinese meridian system.
Okay, so what types of issues can be addressed using EFT tapping?
So all sorts of things. So disorders and conditions that have been studied with EFT include general anxiety, test anxiety, phobias, OCD, PTSD, general trauma and stress, depression, addiction, pain, including fibromyalgia and tension headaches, frozen shoulder, insomnia, seizures, athletic and sports performance, psychological functioning and physiological functioning. And people that have been studied with EFT include college students, veterans, pain patients, overweight adults, hospital patients, athletes, healthcare workers, chemotherapy patients, and people who have phobias. So it's a good all-round stress reduction technique for the small stresses and the big stresses.
Okay. So what is the role of affirmations or statements in the EFT tapping process?
Mm-hmm. So usually you start with what's called a setup statement, and that helps frame up what you're going to tap on. So it's got two parts. The first part is the problem statement, which is actually an acknowledgement of whatever is stressful or bothering you in your own words. So it's the problem as you experience it. You're not trying to minimize its impact, reframe it, or change it into a positive. And it's important that that's as specific as possible, and it's how you feel about it right now. So you might have a range of feelings like frustration and anxiety and disappointment. Pick the strongest one and tap on that. And you can tap on other feelings later on. So it could be even, and it starts with even though. So even though I'm experiencing this problem now. And then the second part is an affirmation, which is about self-acceptance of yourself. And this has the effect of increasing your openness and willingness to emotional shifts during the tapping. And you have those two things because you can hold two things to be true at the same time that are different. So yes, this concern exists, and you have these positive qualities to bring to bear on the situation. So you are more than your stress. And it's important that the affirmation sits right with you. So in a lot of tapping videos, they'll say the affirmation is, I completely love and accept myself. And for a lot of people, that absolute statement doesn't feel right. So they're more comfortable with something a bit more tentative, like I'm open to being kinder to myself, or I'm doing the best that I can. So there's no right or wrong. It's whatever works for you. So the setup statement is done while tapping on the pinky side of the hand in between the base of the pinky finger and the wrist. And it's said 3 times, alternating the hands. And after the setup statement, then you use reminder words or phrases from the setup statement to tap on those 9 points we mentioned earlier.
Okay, so how can EFT tapping be used to overcome negative beliefs or limiting thoughts?
So when we have a goal or something we want to be different in our life, we need to ask what has stopped us from getting the goal or making the change already. So listing out all the negative beliefs or limiting thoughts getting in our way is a helpful start. So then we can tap through each of those separately. So, for example, even though I'm having the thought that I'm not good enough, I'm doing the best that I can. So after each round of tapping, we look inwards and notice what's happening in our body and if something's come up for us. So it could be something, a feeling, some words, or a memory, for example. You could have remembered doing a presentation at school and people were laughing at you and you didn't feel like you were enough. Whatever comes up can be added to the list to tap on. And sometimes these things were outside of our conscious awareness before we tapped. And sometimes if those things, those memories happened when we were smaller, we might have absorbed a message as a truth. And tapping can help us let go of those things, even though we didn't know we were hanging on to it. But if they no longer serve us, we can tap on them so we can move forward.
Okay, so can EFT tapping be self-administered, or is it better to work with a practitioner on this?
Well, it can be an effective self-help strategy. And in fact, the creator of EFT wanted it to be available for everybody to be able to use. There's tapping videos on the internet that you can use for free. There's tapping meditations that you can access through popular apps such as Tapping Solutions. And some of these are very good. However, they can only be generic because they have to apply to a lot of people. They can't address the specific individual nuances of something that you're going through. So I would recommend tapping by yourself if your level of distress is like a 5 out of 10 or less, or if it's an everyday problem or a recent stressor. I'd recommend tapping with someone trained in EFT if the level of distress you're experiencing is more than 5 out of 10, or if it's long-standing, or if it's a problem with many layers or highly traumatic. And that's because EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques, plural. So the training provides access to these other techniques. And a trained helping professional also has other modalities and skills to assist you if required. And the rapport you build with a helping professional gives you additional validation and support. And they can also pick up on other things that you say that you might not have noticed that you even said. And that can be incorporated into the tapping.
Okay, so what are some common challenges beginners face when practicing EFT tapping?
Nothing major, probably just forgetting to give the problem a rating out of 10 at the start before they start so that they can see the difference at the end of the tapping. Also, some people might have unrealistic expectations of themselves, thinking that they're going to go home and do an hour of tapping a day, or they might think they've done one round of tapping and it didn't fix the problem, so tapping doesn't work and they don't give it a proper go and give up.
Okay, so are there any risks or side effects associated with EFT tapping?
Well, it can bring up strong emotions, which people can find distressing. And it is possible to feel more distressed temporarily. So I emphasise the need to be kind to yourself and incorporate grounding and somatic touch if that's the case. EFT can make you very sleepy. I love when I see people yawning because it means something is shifting for them. And it's also thirsty work. So it's important to drink plenty of water while tapping and throughout the rest of the day. And a good idea to schedule an early night if you can.
Okay, so how does EFT tapping address trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD for short?
So there's various techniques that can be used to avoid re-traumatizing the person. You can use the same techniques as with any other things that you're experiencing, but some of these different techniques can involve not needing to talk about the traumatic event to avoid re-traumatizing the person. And there's been numerous randomized control trials and outcome studies and meta-analyses, and they've demonstrated that clinical EFT is an evidence-based treatment for PTSD.
Okay, so what is the difference between EFT tapping and other energy psychology techniques?
So I'm only trained in EFT tapping, so I can't really comment on the other energy psychology techniques, but I did hear on a podcast that some practitioners use EFT prior to using EMDR so that people have a containment strategy before using those other techniques.
Okay, and one final question. If there's one bit of advice for using EFT tapping that you would like to give in 30 seconds or less, what would that be?
It can be very helpful for a lot of things. It's the most helpful thing that I have found in 30 years, and it's something I use all the time. Give it a try.
Okay, and on that note, Melody Edwardson, thank you very much for being part of the Deep Dive podcast today.
For more information, go to wellbeingwise.com.au.